Now, what we're digging over here is one of Whittoff's concentrations. This is a spot where he found lots of artifacts, and other people have told us that they found artifacts here, and so that's why we're at this particular spot. And you can see these, well, those tennis balls mark a square, that screen back there, and then these flags over here. That's pretty much where the site is. It really doesn't, so far we haven't been able to find it going into the tree line. So the site, is about 100 feet across. That's where the concentration of material is. And in this particular case, we're not finding a lot of artifacts. And what we're finding is just resharpening flakes from sharpening scrapers and knives. We found a few broken scrapers. So that's what they're doing here. And in this case, it looks like this is a place where conceivably just one family visited. One extended family with uncles and aunts. So there might have been 10 people living there. Probably not, certainly not 25 would have been living there. Probably be smaller than that. So this is just one, we think this is one visit, which is kind of interesting. And we'd like to compare this. One of the problems up here is that nobody has mapped their artifacts. In fact, these concentrations, nobody has mapped those either. We know about them through people just tell us, this is where I found it. Everybody tells us, well, I always found my stuff over there. When they were allowed to collect here, Mr. Lesher and there's actually Mr. Shoup's sons have showed up, and they said this is where we collected. They remember when Whittoff was, Mrs. Shoup, the grandmother, she was here, and she said, I remember when John Whittoff came out with his kids and his wife, and he would collect things right in here. So it was kind of interesting talking to her, and she gave us some pictures too. She's still looking for pictures of Whittoff, but she gave us some pictures of what the farm looked like. So we don't really know where these people tell us where they are, and I'm sure they're not lying to us in most cases. So we would like to actually map those concentrations.
So Whittoff didn't map it?
He wasn't very good in the field. He did a lot of work, but he didn't document it very well. And he published a lot, but he didn't, his report says he found 11 concentrations here. He just didn't tell us where. But this is the first mapped collection of artifacts from the site. And so we would like to compare this to some of these other concentrations. And again, my thought was, well, I'll just go out and dig them. Turns out Mr. Schertzer, when I was here in 1989, I just did surface work too, and I did some soils analysis and things like that, but I didn't do any excavation. But when I talked, he has a collection, and actually he keeps it locked up in a safe. It's not here, in fact. He has a collection of artifacts, and he had just bought a farm and found out actually in those trees over there, there's a clearing about 100 yards into those trees, and a farmhouse and a little, couple acres, 5 or 10 acres that have been plowed up. And he had just gotten that farm, and when he did, there was a cup of artifacts sitting on the kitchen sink. And they were all on a dog of chert, and he asked the guy, he says, where'd you find that? He says, I find it all right out here in front of my house. And so that cup represents one spot. All the rest of the artifacts, we don't know where they came from, but that cup comes from just one spot, and he's been collecting it ever since. Because I remember at the time I said, this is incredibly important, keep that stuff separate, and he did, which is, they don't always do that. But he kept it separate, so I want to compare his collection, from one concentration to our collection over here. Now he's going to have a lot more tools because I don't think his has ever been collected before. Whereas this has been in grass actually for 30 years. I've never seen this plowed before. I got here in 1980, and I've never seen this plowed before. So this is the first time it's been plowed since 1980, or before 1980. And actually before that they had a couple of apple trees in here. So it's probably been a long time since it's been plowed. But we aren't finding a lot of artifacts. And I think part of the reasons is that people have collected a lot of them. I mean, we find lots of lots of chips from sharpening tools. And yeah, mostly just from sharpening tools, but we don't find a lot of tools themselves. I think they've mostly been picked up. And another thing that I've learned on this trip that I wasn't really aware of before is that the general consensus is that most of the fluted points are found over there on Mr. Schertzer's property. So whatever they were killing, and we find mostly broken ones, was in that direction. Probably what this was over here for processing of whatever was killed over there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we find lots of scrapers. The most common tool here is an end scraper, which is very typical for Paleo-Indian. And we assume that they were used for cleaning hides. We think they were hide scrapers. And so the idea that this was They were processing, caribou furs for clothing and for tents. That seems to all fit. There's, to some extent, it's almost superficial because nobody's done a lot of testing on the tools, and there's microscopic microwear testing that you could do on these tools and get a much better idea of how they were actually used, and that's something else that we would like to do. And we're doing this in cooperation. Well, we have a grant from the National Park Service, but also Mercyhurst College and Clarion University of Pennsylvania are also part of this project. And they were down here with the crew up until the middle of, I guess, the first week in June. And now they moved on to Texas.
Okay.
And I've just been trying to clean up since they left is all I'm doing.
All right. Well, great.
Okay. Mark, Elizabeth,
John, Catherine, Addison.
so these guys, Brad and Mark, are volunteering for us, but they're like loyal and senior volunteers. They've helped us out here consistently, and also when we worked up at Fort Hunter. Elizabeth works in the lab, and Mike's a student at Hack, and he hasn't figured out what he's going to do yet. Geoarchaeology.
Work for you.
Yeah. Archaeology, or you got one?
Brendan here maybe, or
I would probably step it back a little in case he decides to go in that direction.
No, why don't you step it closer so we don't have to wheelbarrow it. Keep
Right
going
here?
close to that pile, otherwise
okay.
shouldn't be any further than a throw. This is a flake he's done. This is pretty typical, guys. That's an edge of a flake. It's really classic color. It's Onondaga chert. It sort of has a bluish gray, and actually there's sort of light browns that run through it. This white on the edge is a patina that's formed when it's been laying in the ground for long periods of time. In fact, that's patina right there. That's the outer rind of it right there.
Or is it that one?
But this is the edge of a flake.
Yours was in there, right? No, yours was in there.
You know anything about flake tool
Okay,
technology?
and mine was in
No.
there.
Okay. The stone that they use to make
Like
tools.
flint, sort of? Or?
Oh yeah. And actually, it's very, very similar to flint. Geologically, we don't have any flint in the New World because flint's always associated with chalk.
Yeah.
But we have things that are like it. Cherts, and they're called chert or jasper, and this is Onondaga chert. And there's lots of this material, well, in western New York. In Pennsylvania, the favored material during this time period was jasper from over in Allentown or in the State College area. In
Where does
Allentown,
obsidian come from? Is that?
Idaho.
Okay.
What's that called up there? It's not the plateau.
Not Tetons or the
Badlands or whatever.
Right.
But that's where you're. It's questionable whether anybody's ever found obsidian in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Seems to be obsidian in New Jersey, but all of it's been traded. But it's astounding that it would be traded even that far.
Yeah.
That's a thousands of miles.
What you're working out, right?
But stone that they use, again, jaspers and cherts, it has a cryptocrystalline structure and a concordial fracture, which means it's very glass-like. And have you ever shot a BB through a window? I know you have, you're lying to me. I never shot one, but my kids have all shot. But it goes in with a real small hole, and there's a cone-shaped break to it. And essentially that's how these stones break. And when you hit, and we're bringing all our stuff out for several days. Now that I changed trucks, I don't have anything really to show you. But when you hit a piece of chert on the edge, it's just like that cone. Half the force goes out in the air, half the force goes into the stone. And so all the flakes that you knock off really kind of have a cone-like shape to them. And of course, they can direct their force in different ways, and they use different tools. So, but it all has a cone-like shape, and that's what's going on. So you're going to end up with these feathered edges where the end of the force goes right out to the edge of the stone. And that's what a lot of this stuff looks like. And you can see how this is, you knock off a flake and you can start cutting things with it right away. I mean, it's razor sharp. It's glass, essentially.
So that would be used as a tool. This could be used as a tool.
This is the edge of something that could have been used as a tool. This is probably a sharpening or a finishing flake off of a tool. I don't know that this was actually used.
Right.
And again, all of their tools, since they've traveled so far, have been heavily resharpened. And what we find here are lots of tools that are completely used up. You couldn't use this tool anymore. We found one last week that's just really classic. It wasn't broken. It was the whole thing, and it probably started out, 4 or 5 inches long. And what we found out was an inch long. It had just been resharpened down to the nub.
Times, yeah.
And now you couldn't even stick it into a handle anymore. And all of them would have had handles.
Yeah.
You couldn't even put it into a handle. There just wasn't enough of it left to hold it in place. So that's what we're doing. We're digging in 1 meter squares using the metric system, so it's all 1 meter. In this particular field, we did a surface collection. It was all plowed bare in the middle or at the end of April. We collected all the artifacts from the surface. We only found about 40. We mapped all those artifacts. Again, field work is all, you want to know where artifacts came from. Artifacts have not been dropped on the ground at random. They aren't just thrown up in the air helter-skelter. They're just deposited in patterns, and those patterns reflect the behavior and the culture of the people who dropped those artifacts. So it's all about mapping. So all the artifacts we found on the surface, we mapped those in. Actually, we collected this field from here to the road 3 different times. And actually this area in here, since that's where we found all the artifacts, we collected this about 5 different times. So it was a controlled surface collection and we mapped it, but it wasn't a single controlled surface collection. We intensified it because we were finding so few artifacts. After that, we put in what are called shovel test pits. They're small, this right here. See this circle right here, this crack? It's about 18 inches in diameter. It's actually 60 centimeters in diameter. And we put these things across this field from that flag right there to these flags over here, which is an area of about 40 by 40 meters. We put these in every 5 meters. So that's another way of sampling the field. Where are the artifacts coming from? And then after that, we took 1 meter squares, those things there, or this thing right behind you here. We took 1 meter squares and we put them down where we found the highest concentrations of artifacts. We're looking for fire features, so we're looking for some kind of stain in the soil. And that's how we tested this. So you start off with a controlled surface collection, you go to shovel test pits to refine where you think the artifacts are, then you go down to these 1x1s. And this particular spot right here, we found lots of artifacts in the shovel test pit in the 1x1, and so we expanded over top of that. And again, we're looking for features. It's fun to find the artifacts, but we're really looking for the features. And we picked this spot. There were other spots that had lots of artifacts. This spot over here, for example, has lots of artifacts. But there, you definitely came right down on bedrock. And so there's no chance that they had dug any hole or somehow created a fire feature there that we were going to find, because it's all been plowed up. And this is the surface that Paleo Indians were living on. They were standing right here on this ground. This surface hasn't changed. And when they looked over here, the topography really hasn't changed a whole lot. But they were standing close to bedrock.
So in terms of topography, this is what it would have looked like 11,000 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
what makes you think that?
Huh?
That's what makes you believe that or think that.
Well, the soil's not dropping from the sky. That's not happening. So there's not buildup of soil. This hasn't been flooded. And down the river valleys, they've changed. The topography of our river valleys have changed quite a bit because soil is being deposited down here. Soil's not being deposited up here at all. What happens up here is erosion. And things were pretty stable here until it started to farm. Now this hill is steep enough that there's always been soil going down that hill. And actually this dip in here, goes between us and that rise over there. We've augured through here, we've done some geologic testing, and actually the soil profile is very deep in that dip. So that's filled up. Now we're not sure exactly when, but that is definitely filled up too. And when they started plowing here, when they clear cut the ground, that would have removed all the vegetation which was holding the soil, and then when they plowed it, and they probably plowed this for at least 100 years, when they plowed it, that would have increased erosion. So yeah, the soil has eroded down, so the surface has gone down. We don't think it's going down a whole lot though, because if it had gone down a whole lot, we wouldn't have any of these flakes. If there had been enough energy to remove several feet of soil, it would have removed these things too, and we still find these. So that's why we think, because the artifacts are still here and they're very small artifacts, we think, yeah, soil has been removed, but it has been removed, so we haven't lost feet of soil here. But that's a good question. And yeah, we've just expanded on here because we found lots of artifacts. And that trench that goes into the tree line, we had some thought that the tree line is the least plowed and the least collected. And so again, we were hopeful that we would find features in there because that hadn't been plowed as frequently. Tree lines are real typical of property. This is a property tree line. So this tree line is, I mean, the trees aren't very old because you're always cutting the trees down for firewood and things like that, but this is where the least plowing would have occurred.
Now you go, it looks like you do 1 meter squares, and then do you go down about...
We go down to the bottom of the plow zone.
Is that in like 10 centimeter segments you're doing or something?
Yeah,
or?
we do. You really don't have to. We've done it. You can see the changing colors. Now, don't stand near the edge. We don't want to crush these walls. Archaeology is all about mapping, and we use those malls for mapping. We assume that they are somewhat close to, well, we've measured them in, and actually that nail is the exact 1 meter line. That point right there is north 159 meters and east 109 meters actually from our datum point, our 00 point. And our 00 point actually is out in that field over there someplace. But we set up our line, our baseline here. And so we know exactly where each one of these are, and we transfer that to a map. But in terms of, and so yeah, we want to protect, we want to maintain these edges. So you can walk up to the edge, but never stand or sit on the edge. You can see that in the profile here, that's the plow zone. That dark, well, now it's white, it's gray. But that's the plow zone. And this essentially is, we're very close to the bedrock. That's what they're plowing here. And it's really kind of impossible for artifacts to be in that. Now, when we first started here, we were taking 10 more centimeters out of the plow, out of the subsoil. This red is the subsoil. We never found artifacts in it, and so we've stopped doing it. It's mostly rock. And actually, the plow zone was also mostly rock. We get about half of 1 meter square is actually soil. You'll see that it's just full of rock. But the artifacts, we catch them mostly catch them in the 1/8 inch screen. You see they stack, well, they stack the artifact, or the screens, and the top one's a 1/4 inch.
And 1/8 is the bottom one.
Yeah.
So you go through 2 screenings before you usually...
Yeah.
So you take that, what's left over
You'll train your eye
from that, then you bring it over to the...
No.
You just...
See, that's the 1/4 inch screen sitting on the side there.
Right.
That's the 1/4 that sits on top of the 1/8.
Oh, okay.
And so you screen the 1/4 into the 1/8.
And then,
yeah, then you screen the 1/8. And we are doing it in 2 levels. Again, there was some thought that we were finding most of it in the second level of the topsoil. I'm not sure that that's true now that we're starting to, now we've accumulated lots of these. I think you're finding about the same in each one of them. But we want to see, and so we're going to continue that out for the rest of this season. And maybe next year we'll change that. But, so that's what we're doing.
Oh, great.
It's pretty simple stuff. If you want to join in with these guys over here.
That would be great. Film this first, and I'll come in.
Okay, we pre-screened in the 1/4 inch screen. Now we're down to the 1/8 inch screen.
Okay.
So if we do find something, it's going to be fairly small. Material finding is on in Dogwood Church from up by Batavia, New York. When you look and see it, you'll definitely know because it has a blue-gray, glossy tint to it, more or less. But some of the flakes we're finding actually do fall through the 1/8 inch screen.
Oh, they do.
Yeah,
he was saying that most of what you found have been in the 1/8 inch.
It is, but we found some hanging onto the sides ready to pop through, and we can actually catch them underneath.
Wow.
There's definitely a lot more color than the other one.
You see the fractures on it from flaking? One side,
See the white.
that side's smooth, that's a piece that broke off. The other side was napped.
Cool.
You see the edge wear on it and all. And that's got a pot lid that was heated.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the little hole, how there's little.
Okay.
In that
So that would be
picture.
evidence that there was some kind of fire around here, maybe, or...
Yeah. But they found if they heat the stones, they would actually flake better for them.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so now here's the thing. roughly 11,000 years ago, somebody was sitting right here working, resharpening their tools so they could, you know, clean hides off, or it could have been from a point that they were using for a spear point. So you're the first person to pick that up in over 11,000 years.
Sounds good, Dad.
That's why I didn't pick it up. I let you pick it up. you get the
First thing I've ever found, too. There we go.
Okay. Liz, do we have a bag?
Nope, this is mine.